Namaskar, Pranam, Jain to all of you. At first, I would like to request you all to please mute your audio. I welcome you all to this monthly lecture series by International School for Jain Studies. Before we start our proceeding, I would like to request our research associate, Ms. Pragya Jain, to recite Naukar Mantra. Over to you, Pragya ji.
Jai Jinendra, please join your hands. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Vachayanam, Namo Loe Savvasahunam. Eso panchanamo yaro savvapavapanasano mangalanam cha savvesim padhamam havai mangalam.
Today, we all are here at virtual platform of International School for Jain Studies for an online lecture by Professor Dr. Jeffery Dillon. And the topic of his lecture is Anekanta and Ahimsa, Relativity in the context of Jain practice. Professor Jeffery is a renowned scholar of Indian philosophy and religion, particularly Jain philosophy and religion. Dr. Jeffery is a professor of religion, philosophy, and Asian studies at Elizabethtown College, Pennsylvania. Dr. Jeffery earned his PhD in 2000 from University of Chicago Divinity School. He has authored many books, including Jainism and Introduction in 2009 and Nonviolence and World Religions, a Conscious Introduction in 2021. For his academic contribution, he has received many awards. We are very fortunate to have such a scholar with us for this lecture today. Professor Jeffery, behalf of myself, behalf of International School for Jain Studies, I welcome you. Today's chairperson is Dr. Jaswant Modi ji is today's chairperson. He is a retired gastroenterologist and philanthropist from Los Angeles, California. Dr. Modi is one of our promoters, advisors, and his charitable giving is concentrated on introducing Prakrit and Jainology globally. He has sponsored many programs of ISJS, currently a 9-month study Prakrit study program and a project of English translation of a Prakrit dictionary. These two projects are in progress with the financial support of Dr. Jaswant Modi. So I welcome him behalf of myself and behalf of ISJS. I would like to welcome our president and founder of ISJS, Dr. Suganchan Jain ji. Since its inception in 2005 till July 2020, he was the chairman, and now he is the honorary president of International School for Jain Studies. Sir, on behalf of myself, behalf of ISJS, I also welcome you to this inaugural lecture of monthly online series. I would like to welcome our co-founder, promoter and advisor of ISGS, Dr. Sulekji. Dr. Sulekji is the past president of Jain, the Federation of Jain Association in North America, and the past chairman of Academic Liaison Committee of Jain. Sir, I welcome you to this virtual platform of ISGS. I welcome each and every participant, every attendee of this online lecture series. I like to welcome our academic advisor, Professor Prakash Chand Jain ji, who is from Delhi. I welcome our colleagues at ISGS and our colleagues at Firodia Institute of Philosophy, Culture and History. Again, I welcome you all to the inaugural session of this online monthly series on a different aspect of Jainology. So this is the inaugural lecture of this online lecture series. So I welcome you all. Friends, before I invite Dr. Jeffery to deliver his talk, I would like to present a brief introduction to ISGS. Friends, ISGS was founded in 2005 by Dr. Suganchan Jain of India and Dr. Sulekchan Jain from USA as a voluntary, non-government, non-profitable academic institution with an objective to introduce academic studies of Jainism in the universities of the world, particularly to North America. And to approach this objective, what we do, we organize residential programs during summer and winter, and we provide an experiential and academic exposure to participants invited for our program. In 2020, to enhance our facilities to provide better infrastructure and better academic environment to our participants, ISGS merged its all operation to Amar Prerna Trust of Dr. Firodia family, Pune. During summer, we offer 2 programs on Jain studies, as you can see at slide. A 3-week program for senior undergraduates and graduates, and a 5-week program for senior graduates, PhD students, and faculty members. We also offer a 3-week teaching for peace program for school teachers. Besides these, under the leadership of Professor Christopher K. Chappell, the yoga student of Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles visit ISGS for 3-week yoga program. We also organize a 10-day program in winter. We introduced this program in 2018. And for 2 years, we organized this program at Ahmedabad in Gujarat. Since 2020, this program is conducted virtually every year from December 28 to January 6. Besides various programs on Jainology, for past 3-4 years, ISGS is actively involved in the promotion of Prakrit language. And we have set up a division for Prakrit studies. As far as Prakrit study is concerned, ISGS organizes 2 types of courses on Prakrit language. As a long-term course, ISGS offers a 9-month Bhagwan Mahavir Prakrit Fellowship program. We introduced this program in 2019, and the 3rd program is going on. We have announced this program again for 4th program. So you can visit our website to know in detail. As a short-term course, we organized a 20 lectures program on fundamentals of Prakrit language. And the course was conducted from November 8 to December 7, 2022. And 34 participants from China, Germany, Sri Lanka, USA, and India attended this program. Today's speaker, Professor Jeffery, also attended this program. We have offered same program with some modifications and with addition of few more topics from March 3 to June 2 this year. In this 3 months program, classes will be held on Fridays and Saturdays only, and link to the application for this course is also available at our website. Our Prakrit division has undertaken 2 translation projects also. Our senior research fellow, Professor Ashok Kumar Singh, is translating Prakrit grammar of Acharya Hemchandra in English, and our newly appointed Professor Dinanath Sharma, who is retired from Gujarat University as Professor of Prakrit, he is translating Prakrit dictionary by Shabd Mahalo in English. So as you can see in this chart, 945 participants from USA, UK, Canada, Europe, Russia, Singapore, Zimbabwe, Pakistan, Thailand, Iraq, Tashkent, Philippines, and from many other countries have been attended our academic programs. ISGS is involved in other academic activities also. We undertake research projects on different aspects of genealogy. We have already conducted 7 research projects. We also organize seminars and workshops on different aspects of Shramar tradition, particularly on Jainism. We are also involved in publication activities. We publish a peer review online research journal on Jainism. We publish a fortnightly newsletter. We also publish books and proceedings of our seminar. And till date, we have published 10 books with standard serial number, and a book on Jain business engagement and ethics is under progress. ISGS has signed memorandum of understanding with various institutions in India and abroad for study and research in Prakrit and genealogy. In India, Mangalayatan University, Aligarh, Jain Shiksha Pracharak Society, Delhi, and Gujarat University, Ahmedabad are our partner institutions. And in overseas, the Federation of Jain Association in North America, Loyola Marymount University, and Ghent University in Belgium, these 3 institutions are our partner institutions. So friends, this is all about ISGS. Once again, I welcome you all to this online lecture on Anekanta and Ahimsa, relativity in context of Jain practice. So once again, I welcome you all, and I request Professor Jeffery to deliver his talk. Over to you, Dr. Jeffery.
Thank you so much for your kind welcome. Namaskar, Jai Janendra to everyone. For those observing it, happy Mahashivratri also. If I can share my screen, I'll begin my presentation. So just have to, let us see. You should be seeing my screen very shortly. Okay. Yes, and so here I am. Hopefully you're all seeing my slide there, Anekanta and Ahimsa, relativity in the context of Jain practice. I'm going to move my head out of the way here. And so as you can see, the picture I have here is of a multifaceted gem. And this is a nice illustration of the nature of existence according to the Jain doctrine of Anekanta, Anekantavad, the idea that everything has multiple facets. There are many, many ways to look at any topic. So my thesis today is the following. This lecture will explore the interrelations between the practice of Ahimsa and the doctrine of the complexity of existence, Anekantavad, in the Jain tradition. Some scholars have argued that Anekantavad is best understood as a form of intellectual Ahimsa, the application of Ahimsa to the intellectual realm. Other scholars have contested this characterization and argued that that's not the case. This presentation will argue that while Anekantavad has not always been employed, as an expression of intellectual ahimsa. There are good reasons to do so. There are good reasons to employ it in this fashion, and to use this doctrine to extend the concept of ahimsa to the realm of philosophical debate. And what I want to explore is what that means precisely. I think we very often fall into a misunderstanding when we are talking about Anekantavad and ahimsa, and that is the assumption that it is somehow violent to disagree with someone, that we have to always agree, we have to be agreeable to everything. And that's clearly not the case. There are some things that we need to disagree with sometimes, but that does not have to be done in a violent manner. There's an expression that is becoming popular in my country. You can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think this is really the essence of what the Jain tradition is getting at when we talk about Anekantavad in conjunction with the idea of ahimsa. So what is Anekantavad? Let us familiarize ourselves briefly with this. I know from seeing the names of many people in the program, many of you have heard me speak on this before. So I'm going to be fairly brief about just what Anekantavad is, and then move on to my thesis. So at its most basic, Anekantavad is the teaching that the nature of reality is inherently complex. Nothing can be reduced to one single characteristic or concept. The opposite of this is what we might call reductionism. So to take a couple of quick examples, there are philosophers who adhere to what is called materialism. This is similar to the Lokayata or Charvaka view in ancient Indian philosophy, that everything can be reduced down to material substances, including things like consciousness and experience. It's all just material objects connecting in various ways. And many of us find that view inadequate and question that idea, but it's a very prominent view, materialism. Then you have the opposite of materialism, sometimes called idealism, which would say that everything is only consciousness, only mind, and that what we experience as a material world is nothing more than a projection of our mind. And there are problems with that position as well. The Jain view is that there are, just as our experience reveals to us, multiple dimensions of existence. There are material dimensions. There are ideal or spiritual dimensions. There are dimensions that are permanent and enduring, and there are dimensions that undergo constant change. So philosophical attempts to take just one of these concepts and make it explanatory of everything will end up eventually falling into self-contradiction. So according to the Jain tradition, we need to accommodate all of these various elements in our experience in whatever philosophical explanation we want to give. So this implies that all things can be viewed from multiple perspectives. This is called the doctrine of perspectives, Nayavada, the idea that we all have a different view on reality depending on which philosophical position we take. And of course, many other factors shape our perspective as well. Culture, religion, and even our personal life experience. The view of a person when they're very young may be different from the view of the same person many, many years later. So everything that goes into shaping our experience also shapes our perspective. And according to the Jain tradition, there is some amount of validity in all of these perspectives. And this is because we're all experiencing reality. We are all perceiving the same reality, but from our differing vantage points. So this gives rise to our many diverse views about the nature of things. This in turn implies that the truth of any statement is dependent on the point of view from which it is made, the perspective from which it is made. This is the doctrine of conditional predication, or Syadvada, the idea that my statements are true in a sense from a certain perspective, taking into account what aspect of reality I'm looking at. It is in that sense true. In other senses, it might be false. and in yet another sense, it might be beyond words and inexpressible, and so on. In fact, there's 7 different possible truth values that a statement can have according to this doctrine. So these doctrines have been developed by numerous Jain philosophers through the centuries. Great thinkers of the tradition, Kunda Kunda from the Digambara tradition, Siddhasena Divakara, Samantabhadra, also both from the Digambara tradition, Haribhadra Suri, Yashovijaya from the Shvetambara tradition. And I don't have time to go into the details of each of the views of each of these philosophers, but they have all contributed various aspects to this idea of Anekantavad, Syatvad, and Naivad, that from each of these thinkers, we get different aspects of this philosophy being developed. They are all many centuries apart. Kunda Kunda takes us to the early era of the first few centuries of the Common Era. Yashovijaya is relatively recent, just on the cusp of the modern era. And there are modern and contemporary Jain thinkers as well who continue this conversation. So for those who are less familiar with this idea, I want to give an example that might be useful in helping us understand Anekantavad. This is from the physical sciences. Here you see 6 photographs of the same object. This is the Crab Nebula. It's a vast nebula, many light years from where we are. And the light we are seeing from it shows us how it looked hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But here you see 6 very different looking photographs. Now they're all looking at the same object, but why do they look different? Well, they have looked at this object using different wavelengths of light. So you see radio waves depicted here, infrared, visible light, how our eyes would perceive it, ultraviolet light, X-rays, and then finally gamma rays. And when I've presented this to students before, I ask them, which of these is the correct depiction? Which of these is the true depiction of the Crab Nebula? And it's a trick question because, of course, all of them are. All right, they are all correct. None of them is false or wrong, but they're different because each captures only one aspect of this phenomenon, right? The radio wavelength that is being received is different in each one, so the appearance that comes out is different. But none of them are wrong, and at the same time, none of them is the complete truth, right? We'd have to look at all of these, and probably many more, to really get a complete sense of the Crab Nebula. And in fact, Anekantavad is in fact even more rigorous than this. Let us assume these photographs were all taken at the same time. There is subtle change over time in any object. So you would have to view the Crab Nebula throughout its entire existence, taking many photographs in order to get a sense of the entire entity. So in the same way, you see me right now, I'm wearing my orange shirt. So you may think, okay, Dr. Long wears an orange shirt. Well, I do sometimes, but sometimes I wear a black shirt. Sometimes I wear a red shirt. Sometimes I wear a green shirt. No single statement about my existence is complete because they're all dependent on time, on space, on context, and on the perspective of the viewer. So this has been understood by Jain thinkers for millennia. It's a very old idea. At the same time, it's a very distinctively Jain idea because we find that of the other schools of Indian philosophy, there is more of a tendency to follow just one particular philosophical concept and apply that universally to everything. That's the reductionism I mentioned earlier. Whereas in the Jain system, you really see a unique emphasis on bringing in all of the different facets into our understanding. How did this doctrine come about? It is tied in its very origins to Ahimsa. There are other factors as well. Anekantavad emerges from within the Jain tradition, and several things probably gave rise to this very distinctive Jain approach to reality. One is the focus on ahimsa, nonviolence in thought, word, and action. Now, we might ask, what does ahimsa have to do with having multiple perspectives or viewing things from many perspectives. And Peter Belczarowicz, I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name, but he's an excellent Polish scholar of early Jain philosophy. And he's done an excellent study on this topic. And from looking at very old Prakrit texts, he has deduced that one of the origins, one of the causes of Anekantavad was the concern of Jain ascetics from very early in the tradition, from the time of Mahavir himself, to differentiate between living and non-living organisms. And this is extremely important in the life of a Jain ascetic, because if you're familiar, which I assume many of you are, with the rigors of Jain ascetic life, it's very important to know where living things are. This affects where one can sit, where one can lie down, where one can stand, and of course, where one can step, right? And so it's important to always be aware and mindful and perceiving. And okay, I see something very small where I'm about to place my foot. Is that a living thing? I need to determine that. And so a fairly sophisticated philosophical system begins to develop based on how one determines the presence of living and non-living organisms, and in what sense is something living or not. And this comes even to the very microscopic level. I know I was just talking with some students the other day in biology who were telling me that I made a comment about viruses, and they said there's some debate about whether a virus should be regarded as a living organism or not. And I immediately thought of Anekantavad. I said, well, what's your criterion? How do you define life? And this, of course, gets us to very fundamental philosophical questions. So Anekantavad, from its origins, was connected with Ahimsa, the need to determine what is living and what is not living. Then we have Bhagavan Mahavir's both and approach to what are called in the scriptures the avyakta questions. These avyakta questions also appear in the Buddhist scriptures, in the Pali canon. And these are questions which are greatly debated. And avyakta can literally mean unanswerable or unspeakable. And so the great mysteries of life. Did the universe have a beginning? And if so, what was it? Is the living being, is the person immortal? Do we continue on after death, or is death the end? Questions of this kind were posed to the Buddha, but they were also posed to Bhagavan Mahavir. And as we see in text like the Bhagavati Sutra of the Shvetambara canon, Mahavir took a both and approach to these questions. So when he would be asked, for example, is the soul eternal? Is the jiva eternal or non-eternal? He said, well, in one sense, it's eternal because it goes through many births, but it continues to exist. It's not destroyed by the death of the body. At the same time, depending on what we mean by jiva, right? When jiva means a living thing, if we're referring to the body, well, it begins and it ends. It is born at a certain time, it dies at a certain time. So it depends on how you're defining this term. Is the living being the soul? Then if so, it is eternal. Is it the body? Well, then it's non-eternal. So there's not one single answer, yes or no, to is the jiva eternal or non-eternal. It's both. It depends on how we are defining it. Same with the universe itself. Bhagavan Mahavir is asked, is the universe eternal or non-eternal? He says it's eternal, nitya, from one perspective, because there's always been a universe and there will always be a universe. There's no absolute origin point, according to the Jain understanding. But he says the universe goes through cycles. There is the avasarpani and the utsarpani described in the Jain worldview, that things advance, they evolve, they become progressively better, and then there's a period of de-evolution and things fall apart, and then the process begins again. So are you talking about this universe when you asked if the universe is eternal or non-eternal, or are you talking about the entire process? If you're talking about the entire process, it's ongoing, it's eternal, it goes on forever. If you're talking about this universe, the world as we know it now, it came into being at a certain time and it will pass away at a certain time. So again, it depends on our perspective. It depends on how we define things. So this becomes a bedrock of Anekantavad for centuries after that, right? That the answers to our questions depend on the definitions we're using and the intent behind our question. Then you have finally the worldview of Jainism, the pluralistic ontology of the Jain tradition, which affirms the irreducibility of the basic substances making up reality. According to the Jain tradition, everything does not go just back to one original substance. You have jiva, the souls, the living beings, pudgala or matter. You have dharma, the principle of dynamism or motion in this context, adharma, which in this context refers to the principle of inertia. You have space, akash, you have kal, time, and in some writings you have abhava as well, the non-presence of something at a particular time. And so because of this, from a Jain point of view, again, a reductionist perspective, a reductionist philosophy is untenable, because none of these dravyas, none of these substances is reducible to the rest. They all coexist. So they all have to be affirmed. How is this then applied to actual discourse, right? What is, as we say, so what, right? So reality is many faceted. What does that mean? So as you see here, there's a picture of from the very famous Indian story of the blind people and the elephant. It's a very, very famous story, often used to illustrate Anekantavad. Traditionally, Jain thinkers have used Anekantavad as a methodology for conceptualizing differences across worldviews. This approach has been illustrated with the ancient parable of the blind people and the elephant. For anyone who's not familiar with it, the basic idea here is you have a group of blind people, and you can see that each one is grasping a different part of the elephant. The elephant is very patient. It doesn't mind them doing this. And so you see someone grasping the trunk, someone grasping a tusk, someone grasping an ear, someone grasping a leg, someone touching the side of the elephant, someone grasping the tail. And they proceed to give very different descriptions of what an elephant is. The person touching the side says, this is like a wall, whereas the one grasping the trunk says, it's like a snake. Someone holding the leg says, it's like a tree trunk. They proceed to argue about what an elephant really is, until someone gently explains to them that they are all partly correct. The description they're giving is accurate for the perspective they have, the part of the elephant they have grasped, but they've failed to grasp the entire elephant. So they need to listen to one another and realize that there are complementary truths. And in this parable, the elephant is our shared reality. It is the reality we all inhabit, but we are all experiencing it from our different perspectives. We therefore understand it differently and generate different philosophies. And we need to be patient with one another and listen and learn from one another. This is the basic lesson. And this is another connection. This is why many contemporary Jain thinkers have seen this idea as an application of Ahimsa to the realm of philosophical discourse, because it encourages us to be patient with one another, to listen to those with a different point of view, and to not immediately rush to contradict, but to understand that they are grasping some aspect of the same reality of which we are a part. So in the contemporary period, many Jains see Anekantavad as an expression of intellectual ahimsa, an application of the principle of nonviolence to the realm of philosophical discourse. This was the approach of the late Acharya Mahaprajna, pictured here, who saw Anekantavad as a synthesis of relative and absolute perspectives. Now, what does that mean? My own understanding of Anekantavad really I owe entirely to Acharya Mahaprajna. It was his teaching that really shaped my own understanding of this doctrine. And what synthesis of relative and absolute means is as follows. So think back to the photographs of the Crab Nebula. So each one was different. Each one was based on a different wavelength of light. Therefore, they appeared different. They captured a different facet of the reality. So relative here means relative to our perspective. If we're looking at the world with ultraviolet light, it's going to look a certain way. If we're going to look at the world with gamma rays, it's going to look a certain way. Similarly, if we grasp part of the elephant, that's going to be a different experience from grasping a different part of the elephant. So these are our relative perspectives, but very important point, and I'm going to return to this very, very shortly. These relative perspectives are not simply kind of free floating in the universe, right? They are not arbitrary. They're not simply a result of, well, I like it this way, you like it that way, and so we have to agree to be different. We are referring back to a shared reality, right? The Crab Nebula looks different in those different photographs, but it's the same Crab Nebula. It looks different because it actually radiates those different wavelengths of light, right? So this is what we call the absolute side of things. There is a definite way that reality is, and we're all trying to apprehend that. We're all trying to capture it and express it. So in other words, Anekantavad is not what is sometimes called relativism. I like to use the term relativity. I'm invoking Einstein there. The idea that there is a reality, but we have different frames of reference within that reality. Relativism is more of a popular position, which and I find it usually comes from a sense of despair. If you're a student who's learning about the world's religions for the first time, you become very confused. See, I don't know what to think. The Buddhists say this, the Jains say this, the Muslims say this, the Christians say this, atheists say this, theists say this. I don't know what to think. Well, maybe they're all kind of right? This is a very comfortable position that students sometimes take, because it's very difficult to engage in the hard work of sorting out the unreal from the real, right? What is true, what is false? And students, I find, often have a very sweet desire not to offend anyone, saying, okay, I don't want to say that I disagree with your point of view. So I'll say, well, your view is right for you, my view is right for me. Now, it's a very sweet sentiment. It's a good sentiment, but we can't get very far in understanding reality if we think that way, right? If we are afraid to assert any definite perspective, then the conversation ends, basically. And so what I want to suggest is that when we talk about Anekanta and Ahimsa, what we mean here is not that there is no definite position to be held, but it should always be accompanied by an openness to the truth of what the other is saying. And that doesn't mean we agree with everything the other is saying, but we listen carefully and we analyze and we understand. Mohandas Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, for many, described himself as an adherent of Anekantavad. For him, this doctrine was a pragmatic one, a matter of learning to view others with empathy. He said once, formerly I used to resent the ignorance of my opponents. Today I can love them because I am gifted with the eye to see myself as others see me, and vice versa. I want to take the whole world in the embrace of my love. And he saw this as a result of Anekantavad, right? That he had learned of this doctrine. First, when he was growing up in Gujarat, he was a Vaishnav Hindu. But he was surrounded by Jain influences. And in fact, his mother's guru was a Jain Muni, a Jain monk. And a little later in life, after he had studied in London and came back to India, he became good friends with the renowned Rajchandra Mehta, Srimad Rajchandra. And he became really a kind of guru to Gandhi and taught him a great deal about Jain thought. And this became a very important influence on Gandhiji's life, Gandhiji's teaching. I believe Dr. Shugan Jain has written a book on the Jain influences on Gandhi, and it's quite a lot. He's quite indebted to this idea. So does Anekantavada equal acceptance? And I want to be very careful how I choose my words here. By acceptance, I mean that we really don't disagree with anybody. Okay, you have your truth, you have your truth, you have your truth, and we're all having truth, and that's great, right? So again, that impulse is a good one. We want to get along, we want to coexist in the world, and we want to understand one another. But if we look back at the history of Anekantavad, how it's been used by Jain philosophers, we don't always find this sort of everybody's right kind of perspective. And John Court's written what's become now rather famous article in this regard. It was written for the journal Philosophy East and West. called Intellectual Ahimsa Revisited, Jain Tolerance and Intolerance of Others. Scholars of Jainism, notably John Court, have argued that historically, Jain philosophers have used Anekantavad to make strong critiques of the views of others, right? That if you look at the writings of many of the Jain thinkers, some of the ones that I mentioned earlier, for example, they will look at the views of various schools of thought, and they will say, okay, yes, this does capture some aspect of truth, but look, it's reductionist, right? It only looks at that. It's Anekanta, right? It's one-sided. But the Jain view is Anekanta, right? It is more encompassing. So Anekanta is actually used as an argument for the superiority of the Jain perspective. So it's not clear that Anekantavad necessarily entails an accepting or open approach toward the views of others. Some of the critiques made by classical Jain philosophers of other schools of thought are quite strong. It's also important to note that Anekantavad, as I just said earlier, is not the same thing as relativism in the popular sense, the view that no definite truth can be known or expressed. And in fact, I had a very good conversation on this with Dr. Sulek Jain, who's also with us today. As he and I discussed in our own conversation, contrary to the previous view, Jains hold very strong views about ahimsa and its implications. For example, vegetarianism and increasingly veganism. I have observed online debates internal to the Jain community over veganism versus vegetarianism. And they're very strong views about this. It's not relativism. It's not saying, well, you have your view, I have my view, and let's not debate it. Debate happens. The non-existence of a creator deity, strongly held view in the Jain tradition. The reality of karma and rebirth, these are strongly held views. So I don't hear Jain saying, well, in one sense there's karma, in one sense there's no karma, right? That's not how Anekantavad actually works. But here's the point I want to make. Anekantavad can be an application of ahimsa to philosophical discourse. Although historically many Jain thinkers have used Anekantavad to show the superiority of Jain perspectives over those of other traditions, which are seen as affirming one-sided or Anekanta perspectives, there's no logical necessity dictating that this method cannot also be used to affirm areas of agreement with other traditions. And in fact, Jain thinkers have done this as well. Jain philosophers such as Haribhadra, while adhering strongly to Jain principles, have also used Anekantavad to show areas of agreement between Jain teaching and the teaching of other systems of thought. And in fact, Haribhadra is very generous in this regard. This is an English quotation from his 2 verses of his Yoga Drishti Samuchaya. This is the translation by Dr. Christopher Chappell. It can be found in his book, Collection of Views on Yoga. And in these 2 passages, what Haribhadra is doing is saying that, look, there are very important areas of thought where there is wide agreement across traditions, and we want to respect and acknowledge that. He says the highest essence of going beyond samsara, that is what we call leaving behind the realm of rebirth, this is called nirvana. The wisdom gained from discipline, from tapasya, from ascetic practice, is singular in essence, though heard of in different ways. Right? He's showing how the various traditions from India with which he was engaged, there were Shaivas, there were Vaishnavas, there were Vedantins, Nyayikas, Yogins, and followers of Sankhya. He said, they're all talking about nirvana. They're all talking about the same virtues. If you look at the yamas and niyamas, right, from the Yoga Sutra, it's the same as in the Jain tradition. And if you think about the ultimate goal, freedom from rebirth, freedom from suffering, freedom from karma, it's understood in very similar ways, and different names are given to this state, but they all refer to a state of infinite bliss beyond the cycle of rebirth. So he continues, the eternal Shiva, highest Brahman, accomplished soul, suchness. With these words, one refers to it, though the meaning is one in all the various forms. So eternal Shiva, Sada Shiva, very appropriate for today, Shivratri, right? Highest Brahman, Param Brahman, right? This is a term from Vedanta. The accomplished soul, right? The Arhat. Suchness, Tatata. This is a Buddhist term, right? So it refers back to Buddhism. He's saying they're talking about the same thing in somewhat different ways. So my conclusion is that in a polarized world of intense disagreement across religious boundaries, as well as between religious and non-religious philosophies and science, Anekantavad can be a valuable tool for showing that we all inhabit the same reality. That, as the Rigveda says, truth is one, although the wise speak of it in various ways. Anekantavad can be an application of Ahimsa to the realm of discourse, and we would be wise to use it as such, to produce a more humane and accepting environment, while also holding firmly to the truth as we see it. And of course, that's the root meaning of satyagraha, one of Gandhi's favorite terms. The idea is not that we compromise on our highest principles, but that we listen to those who think differently, affirm the places where we agree and have common ground, and articulate disagreement in a respectful way. Say, I'm sorry, this is how I understand it. It's different from how you understand it, right? As we say, disagreeing without being disagreeable. Because if we do fall into harshness, if we fall into recriminations and say, well, your view is different from mine, therefore you're an evil person, therefore you're bad and you're deluded and you're ignorant, then we've left the path of Ahimsa, right? And the person is no longer listening to us, and they're no longer interested in hearing anything we have to say. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I was asked to be relatively brief and leave some time for discussion. And so I will close here, Judge Anindra, and thank you all very much. I'll hand it over to Dr. Modi.
Thank you, Dr. Jeffery, for this nice presentation. Before I invite our chairperson, Dr. Modi, friends, the session is open for discussion. So if you have any question, please feel free to ask.
Dr. Modi.
Yes, sir, he is here. But before I invite him, I would like to take some questions. Yes. Subhash, yes. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. Subhash,
Listen,
yes.
very excellent, very brief, very precise explanation of Anekantavad. I highly appreciate it. Sir, now I want to ask you some of the scientific questions. See, I am Subhash Deshmane. I am retired chief engineer, and I was also vice president in Reliance. My background is that I have a very deep interest in spirituality and science. Now, I want to compare Anekantavad to theory of relativity to Einstein.
Yes.
So I will explain. I will be very brief because others might also have to say something. So what I feel is that as you were saying about the materialistic world, it was Newton in 1850 who explained the gravity. So he said that the world is made up of matters. World is made up of matter. But as the science went ahead in 1900 and 1930, when people understood that matter is not the ultimate thing, it is the atom. It is the atom. And from atom, Einstein said that it is not the matter, it is the energy that is the basic of the universe. So he gave an explanation, E equal to mc square, where mass, which represents the matter, is directly related to energy, is directly related. So how you will explain Einstein's theory of relativity to Sadhvat?
So I would explain it in the following way. So if we posit from our layperson's perspective, a non-scientific perspective, there is matter, right? There are solid objects, right? Then there's energy, right? There's this electricity coming through my lamp, for example. And I will say, well, from my perspective, these are two distinct things. And then the question is, then how are they related? And I would say that Einstein has provided us with a synthesis, right? He's shown that what really exists in these two cases is one reality that is mathematically related, right? That if you accelerate matter in a particular way, you get energy, right? Energy is mass times the speed of light squared. And if you, in the same way, energy at a much reduced wavelength is matter, right? So that what we think of as matter and energy are not two different entities. They are the same entity at different frequencies, if you will. I'm not a scientist. I have to confess that immediately. I have a great interest in it. But that the continuum of what we call the material world is really both matter and energy. So if you think in terms of Syadvad, in one sense it's matter, in one sense it's energy, in one sense it's both, and then in one sense it's something else entirely, because what would you call that, right? Maybe we could call it Prakriti, right? We could go with Sankhya terminology or something like that, which implies a kind of dynamic matter. But it is really both matter and energy. It is not anything that can be separable completely between the two. So, I mean, that would be my sort of non-scientific but Anekanta informed perspective on that. And I think it's a great example. Another example I like from physics is the fact that what we call subatomic particles can also act as waves. So are they waves or are they particles? Well, from
Yes,
one
sir.
perspective.
Perfectly right. Perfectly right.
Thank you.
Because another thing is that Dr. Capra from America has related spirituality to science. And
Yes.
what he says is that now science is understanding what our Mahavira has told 25 years ago. And he is going ahead even beyond the wave theory. That means he is going into into the deep of the atom
Yes.
in physics.
Suresh sir.
Quantum physics.
Let
Quantum
somebody
physics.
else ask a question also, please.
Suresh sir.
Yes.
If
Okay,
there's
sir.
some, please let others ask also the question.
Right, sir. So quantum physics is deeply related to spirituality, and which Mahavira has established. That's what I want to ask to doctor.
No, this is not an Anekantic view that you are taking.
Okay, sir.
Correct, sir.
Be careful. We don't say he did that or he did that. So let us not use, singular words, not like that. Because it's a thought process. That's what he's saying.
Suresh sir, please ask your question. Suresh sir.
Yes.
Sulik Bhai has his hand up, so.
Hello. Jeffrey, you always bring so much goodness, so much richness. Every time I've been listening to you for many, many years. So thank you. And I tell you, I was watching, you got the biggest audience today, 58 people from all over the globe. So this is again tribute to you and to ISJ. I have two questions, very, very small. Number one, everybody shows that picture of 6 blind people and the elephant. Okay,
Yes.
very common. My question is that even if there were 100 blind people instead of 6, all watching or looking at the elephant, feeling the elephant, still there is elephant, there is a truth. It does not become a lion.
Yes.
Even though there are some similarities between lion and the elephant from 4 legs and many, but elephant is elephant. So there is a reality, truth, we may not understand it. So nobody can say that in Anekanta says everything is okay.
Right.
Exactly. You mentioned that. So
Exactly.
thank you. Maybe. Second question is, you've been working on it from the University of Chicago many years, probably at least 30 years on this topic. I'm sure your PhD thesis was on this one.
Yes.
Okay. And Mati Lal and many Indian scholars have been working on this for the last 50 years and many more, many more.
Yes.
Where does it stand in the public square, this debate, this concept, this philosophy? Is it progressing further? I know we are working on a practical application of Anekanta, a book. Where
Yes.
is it leading? Is it leading to a very better dialogue with the academicians, understanding Jain point of view?
I believe it is. Our progress is slow and steady. I would like to think we're you know the story of the tortoise and the hare. I think we're the tortoise, but the tortoise did win the race in the long run. So this understanding is advancing, and one reason, in fact, your efforts are a big part of this, because we are having more scholars now studying this from different points of view and different backgrounds. So, you know, Anna at University of California, Anil Mundra at Rutgers, there's my work, many other people, many other scholars have looked at this, and some of us have a big interest in applying this to the public square, right? Public debate. And we've now reached a very interesting point in the conversation. And I know many of you probably know Dr. Stephen Vos. He and I both attended, we were virtual attendees of Anil Mundra's recent talk at Rice University. I believe you were there as well. And so Stephen asked this excellent question, which I've also been working on, which is the barrier, it seems, in making this a generally available view is everyone says, don't you have to be a Jain to follow this view? And what if I'm not a Jain? Can I still use Anekantavad? And so I'm interested in seeing if one can arrive at that same conclusion from different philosophical starting points. And I think it's possible. I think it's possible that there are various thinkers, particularly in the Indian tradition, but even from around the world, who have, we could say, more or less inadvertently stumbled upon something very much like Anekantavad in the course of their work. And I think what we want to do now is draw out the similarities. Of course, there'll be differences also, but say, look, maybe you're not Jain, but this similar concept is available in your tradition or from your background that would enable you to enter this conversation in this way. And the need for something that balances the relative and the absolute is very, very great, right? So this very popular, you know, sort of anything goes view that you were talking about, you know, say, some people might say the elephant's a lion, right? Some people might say it's a rabbit. You know, they'll go in a completely different direction. This has not helped advance society, really, because then people who really are serious about values and about their beliefs become marginalized. And then when they become marginalized, as we've seen tragically, sometimes they resort to violence because they believe the world is against them. And so you have a great rejection of this whole sort of secular order as a result of that. So a lot of good scholars, one that I like to cite is Mark Juergensmeyer, who's written on religious violence, says we need to have a discourse that is open in the way that the secular conversation is supposed to be, but that allows people to come into the conversation with their value systems, with their belief systems, not say, okay, you have to leave all of that at the door and in order to participate in the conversation. I think Anekantavad allows that. I think it's a very powerful thing. And because, you know, there was a very vigorous conversation, entirely peaceful, in India for hundreds of years between people with radically different views, Buddhists, Jains, Vaishnavas, Shaivas, people with many different views, all the various darshanas. And they were able to debate, but they were able to do so in a civil way and in a peaceful way. And this is what we really need to replicate in the modern world. I am rarely active on social media nowadays because I like to announce things like, you know, programs I'm involved in or something. But you immediately see all kinds of nasty comments from people, and they start fighting with each other. And we're very far from intellectual ahimsa, I think, and that's what we need. So I'm very committed to this conversation, and I do see it advancing, but it's slow work. Because we have to also educate people in the basics of philosophy and things of that sort.
Very good.
Thank you, Dr. Jeffrey. Thank you, Suresh sir. Now, I like to invite today's chairperson, Dr. Jaswant Modi ji. Over to you, sir, Dr. Modi.
Jai Jinendra. Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey. International School of Jain Studies has been established in 2005, and since then, it has carried out many different projects, promote Jain Dharma nationally in India to unite different sects, and internationally to the audience of different faith, race, and nationality. As Dr. Pandey earlier in the lecture mentioned, that ISJS has done many different projects. Today's project is the beginning of a new concept. Today's inaugural lecture by Dr. Long about Anekanta and Ahimsa was very enlightening in a simpler terms of a concept of Anekanta. In the coming months, this lecture series will include many different projects that are related to the Jain Dharma. As such, Jain Dharma and climate change, Jain Dharma and cosmology, Jain Dharma in mathematics, Jain Dharma in art, Jain Dharma in archaeology. Ahimsa and Anekanta can be discussed in relation to many different disciplines like Ahimsa in law, Ahimsa in business, Ahimsa in social work, Ahimsa in medicine, Ahimsa and animal ethics, Ahimsa in journalism, and you can go on and on and on. All our rituals and the diet, especially the veganism that is coming up, it has now a known scientific base as it was preached centuries ago by many of our monks. I congratulate ISJS team under the leadership of Dr. Shugan Jain, who has worked tirelessly in promotion, Dr. Sulek Jain and Dr. Srinetra Pandey, along with many others. Of course, all this work is flourishing under the blessings of Dr. Firodia. I am grateful that I'm a part of ISJS, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I will be part of an ongoing series over here, and I thank you very much. Jai Jinendra.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for your appreciations, and thank you for throwing the light on different aspects of genealogy. Surely we will try our best to organize the lectures on your suggested topics. Before I invite our President Suganji for vote of thanks, I would like to announce two things. First one is the recording of this lecture will be uploaded on our YouTube channel. So you can visit our YouTube channel and enjoy the lectures. Next month, the lecture will be delivered by a renowned professor from Germany, Professor Robert Jaden-Bose. Very soon, we will announce the topic and date. Over to you, sir. Suganji. Sir, please unmute.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pandey. Dr. Modi and Professor Long and friends. I think this is the most opportune lecture to start any lecture series, serious lecture studies, because it forms a basis of keeping our minds open rather than closed with fixed ideas. So with that, I think, Jeff, you have done a great job. I would just like to make a few statements, about Anekantva. Why it is Anekanta and why it is so difficult to understand and useful in our life. We start with definition of reality. What is real? And Jain say that reality is both permanent and impermanent. That means opposites coexist. This, most of us forget. Then we say reality is multiple, not one, because, opposites coexist. So we talk of living beings and non-living beings. Okay. Then we say that the substance cannot lose its substantiality. You use the word irreducibility. Like a jeev cannot be reduced to a jeev or things like this. So these are some of the things, that we have formed the basis of the doctrine Anekanta. We start with this thing. Now to really appreciate, the understanding of what do you say, reality or such as we say, we have to use Ahimsa. We have to practice non-violence. Otherwise, we will become rigid. We will not have reconciliation. We will always have conflict. So these I will not talk. And I will close by making one simple statement in that light. Gandhi, when he started his career, he said, God is truth. But as he matured, he said, truth is God. And then he said, Ahimsa is the means to truth. So, relating to your topic, if we want to know real, which is Anekantic, we have to practice Ahimsa. Otherwise, we can never understand the truth. About its expression, I suppose Lord Mahavira knew everything because he was an omniscient, but still he could not express it simultaneously, all of a sudden. And that's where the conditional dialectic of Sadhvat comes. You always make statements one at a time and say with this perspective so that you leave the others open. So you are not definitive and you leave the room open for others to come and accept. So thank you very much, Jeff. It was really a very learning and very illuminating lecture. I really enjoyed, and I hope that this series becomes different from others and brings people like you and other serious scholars on different aspects of Jain philosophy and its application in life. So thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you.